Woo! What's up, everybody? In this video, we will be covering all of the high-yield essentials when it comes to cell and microscope. Now, for your information, guys, A2.2 will have 4 separate videos. This one that you're watching right now, and 3 other videos. Now, I've said it before, and I'm gonna say it again. Please do yourself a favor and visit teachmebio.org for the most amazing premium IB biology resources. Now, without further ado, let's just get started with this video. My question to you is, what is the difference between a rock and the rock? And the answer is real simple. If you look close at the rock, and I mean real close, as in like microscope close, you will see something very special. This little unit right here. You will never see this little unit in a rock because a rock is non-living, whereas the rock is living. This little unit is called a cell. A cell is the basic unit of all living organisms, whether you are a single-celled organism or a multicellular organism. All living things are made up of cells. Now, the thing is, if we take a human being here, he is made up of so many freaking cells, and obviously he is complex. That's because he is made up of many, many different types of cells, not just one kind of cell. That's very important to understand. Now that we understand what a cell is, we need to understand and look at something called the cell theory. The cell theory has 3 conditions or 3 components. Number 1, we already kind of talked about. All living organisms are made up of 1 or more cells. You can be a teeny tiny organism like a bacteria that is only made up of 1 cell. You are still considered living. You can be a complex organism like me or you and a plant which are made up of many, many cells. You are still considered living. Now, the second factor is cells are the smallest unit of life. Now, the big question is, what does it mean to be living? Anything that is living is able to carry out the 7 functions of life. Now, that means by default, if a cell is the smallest living thing, then therefore a cell must be able to carry out these 7 functions of life as well. Now, you've probably heard of all of these before in your biology career at some point, so make sure you drill them into your brain. Please remember that viruses are perfect examples of non-living things. They actually depend on living things to be able to survive. They cannot carry out these 7 functions of life. And to help your big brain on the test, remember these 7 functions of life with this little mnemonic. Hi, Mr. Gren. H for homeostasis, M for metabolism, R for response, and so on. The last component of cell theory states that all cells come from pre-existing cells. This means new cells cannot come out of nowhere, spontaneously forming by themselves. No, 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 no. They come from a previously existing cell that divides to give rise to that new cell. Now we're going to talk a little bit about size when it comes to biology. We know the smallest visible thing by our eye is around 100 micrometers. That's the thickness of a single strand of hair. As far as we were concerned, nothing smaller than this existed until we invented the microscope. Now we know there are things called cells. A eukaryotic cell around 20 micrometers, a prokaryotic cell much smaller than that, around the size of an organelle inside a eukaryotic cell. Even smaller than that, we have viruses, these non-living things. And then we have ribosomes and the tiniest of all molecules like proteins. You know, sometimes I feel like my brain is the size of one of these things. Now, please, guys, remember to be able to know how to convert between different units like centimeters, millimeters, micrometers, and nanometers. It will come in really useful, especially when you do math-related questions. Now we're going to take a second to talk about microscopes, light and electron microscopes. First, I want your brain juices to start flowing. We're going to take a look at one light microscope image and one electron microscope image, and I want you just to compare in your own mind what's similar, what's different, because throughout this video, hopefully everything will make sense when you look at these images again at the end. Firstly, make sure you know what a micrograph is. A micrograph is a picture taken with the aid of a microscope. So a picture taken with a light microscope is called a light micrograph. A picture taken with the aid of an electron microscope is called an electron micrograph. Now we're going to take a look at a light micrograph here of red blood cells. We can see them over here. Now, here, we're going to take a look at a picture, an electron micrograph of red blood cells. What is the difference? What is similar? Now we're going to go ahead and actually compare and contrast these two in detail that you need to know. Now we're going to start with the light microscope, and after we finish the light microscope, we're going to compare each of these individual points directly to the electron microscope. Number one, you should know that light microscopes work with light. Surprise, surprise. And number two, they can view both dead and living organisms. Now let's look a little bit in more detail. Here we have a light microscope, and we're going to make a little diagram here to simplify it. This top piece right here, both of these right here, is called the eyepiece. This is where you will put your eyeballs on to look at what's going on, either here or here. Usually, the teacher will look in here, moving around and looking at the sample, while students will stick their big fat eyeballs onto this part to see what the teacher is seeing. Now, secondly, this black thing right here is called the stage. This is where you're going to put your sample on, and it's going to look something like this. Here you have your little slide with your little sample on it, and you're going to put it on the stage so you can look at it. Very simple. Now, these knobs right here, let me show you. I mean, this part right here is the light source. This is where the light is going to shine from through the sample into here, into here, into your eyeballs. That's the basic idea. Now, obviously, the light microscope will magnify the image, right? So which parts are going to be responsible for magnifying? All of these little glass lenses right here. This one right here is called the objective lens, and it represents any of these four little rods sticking out. They all have different magnification, so you can rotate this knob to choose what magnification you want to use when looking at your sample. And then this one right here is in the eyepiece. It is called the eyepiece lens, and this one is fixed. You can't change this one. Now, the reason why a light microscope can view living and non-living things is because guess what? Light is not dangerous. It will not kill the sample in the process of you looking at it. Now, next, you should know that a light microscope can magnify up to 2,000 times. Let me show you what I mean by this. The lens in the eyepiece can magnify times 10, and these guys can magnify. Depending on which one you choose, it'll be a different number, but usually these can magnify up to like 100. So the total magnification you can get is around 1,000. Special light microscopes can allow up to 2,000, but this is the standard one. Now, here is the formal definition of magnification for those who want to see it. Guys, I'm sorry, I'm about to reveal something absolutely horrific. An equation. Yes, in biology, there are very rare circumstances that you need to know an equation, and this is one of them. Some people prefer to see it in the pyramid format. How this one works is essentially you write it out like this, and depending which one you want to calculate, you just cover that one, kind of like this. So let's say you want to calculate magnification. You go ahead and cover it, and the equation will reveal itself. Size of image over size of object. Now, let's say you want to calculate size of image. You go ahead and cover that one, and the equation will reveal itself, magnification times size of object. You can use either of these. Of course, using this one is quite simple. You just rearrange it. We're using basic math for the specific variable you want to calculate. Now, let's go ahead and actually apply it in a real question. So once upon a time, there was a little ant walking around. He was very, very small, and this one guy was looking at it. It was back in the day without phones, so he had to entertain himself somehow. And what he did was he measured the size of this freaking ant, like we all would, right? And it was about 2 millimeters. And then he was having a very good idea, because there was no phones, man. What are you gonna do? He decides he's gonna draw it on a lovely Sunday evening, and he draws it 15 centimeters big. And then he asks himself the question, how much bigger did I draw this ant compared to the real ant? What's the magnification? Now, how do you calculate that? You got to use this equation. What we're going to do is magnification is size of image over size of object. The size of image, 15 centimeters, the size of the real object, 2 millimeters. And now we divide. But we can't divide just yet because the units aren't matching. The top is centimeters, the bottom is millimeters. So we need to convert into the same units. Now we have 150 millimeters over 2 millimeters. Now when we divide, the answer is 75. If we did not convert the units, the answer would be 7.5. And that is completely, completely wrong. So that's one example of a magnification question you should be able to do. Obviously, on the exam, they can ask you different variations. Sometimes they can ask you to calculate size of image or size of object. There's a ton of different ways they can ask this question. So try to do many different versions to get prepared for any kind of possibility on the exam. When you look at something under a light microscope, you may notice some color, but this is not necessarily natural. It might be artificial. What do I mean by that? When you have a sample like a blood sample, if you look at it straight away, you'll notice that it's transparent. It's kind of colorless, kind of black and white maybe. So what scientists usually do to make structures stand out more clearly is they actually add a dye, something that can stain it to give it a more vibrant feel, more obviously for you to see the structures, kind of like this. Now, next, we're going to talk about resolution. A lot of students confuse resolution and magnification. No, 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 no. They are not the same thing, and hopefully I can clarify this. Let's take a look at this image. We have two different cameras, two different imaging systems, and we are zooming into this little doggy's nose, bigger and bigger and bigger. Notice for camera one, as we zoom in, the nose is really, really clear. It is very, very high quality. We can so easily distinguish between the different parts of the dog's nose, even though we magnified the image. With camera 2, we're magnifying the image the same amount, the same magnification, but look, we cannot clearly distinguish the different parts of the dog's nose. They kind of blur together, they blend together all of the different points to look like one point. This, my friends, is what resolution is. Resolution, the simple way of saying it is clarity. This camera has higher resolution, higher clarity as we're magnifying in, whereas this one has a lower resolution. So to strictly define it, we can say that resolution is the ability of an imaging system, like a phone, like a camera, like a microscope, whatever, to distinguish between two separate points. Now, for a light microscope, its resolution is around 200 nanometers. What this means is, if you have two objects that are closer than 200 nanometers apart, the light microscope cannot see them as two separate points. It will blur them together as one object. Now, this brings us to the remaining two things. Number one, the specimen preparation for a light microscope is very straightforward. And also, you should know that light microscopes are relatively inexpensive. Now, this brings us to electron microscopes. What's the big difference between these two? Firstly, electron microscopes do not use light, they use something else, electron beams. And because of that, they can only view non living organisms. Now, here we go. We're going to learn about two kinds of electron microscopes: TEM, transmission electron microscope, and SEM, scanning electron microscope. And there's some subtle differences between these two guys. Now, firstly, I want to mention that electron beams are not visible to our eyes. And because of that, electron microscopes work a little bit different than light microscopes on a fundamental level, because our eyes cannot see those beams. Now, very important, why are electron microscopes not able to view living things? Why can they only view non-living things? Because these electron beams are very dangerous. And as these electron beams are shot towards the sample, towards the specimen will be killed in the process. That is the fundamental reason why. Now, how does a TEM really work? Let me show you. Here we have our specimen right here. Here we have our electron source. This is where the electron beams are going to be fired from, down this direction through the specimen. And as these electron beams travel through the specimen, they will interact with the specimen, and the remaining electron beams will reach the end. We call this end the fluorescent screen. And whatever pattern is built on this fluorescent screen, we will see with our eyes when we look at the fluorescent screen. So these electron beams aren't going directly into our eyes, like with the light microscope, where the visible light went into our eyes directly. No, they will land on this fluorescent screen, and we will then look at the screen to see what happened. And this screen will be able to show us the two-dimensional structure of our specimen, including the internal structures, everything that was inside the cell, for example. That's very key. Remember, TEM makes two-dimensional images showing the inner structure of our cells. Now, what about SEM? SEM is a lot different. SEM will also have an electron beam source, and it will shoot the electrons towards the sample. But the sample will not allow the electron beams to pass through, because the electron beams being used here are a little bit different than the electron beams being used over here. So these electron beams will not pass through. They will rather reflect off in different patterns depending on what your sample looks like. And what's going to happen is there's going to be this little detector all over the place, and they will pick up these patterns of reflection of these electron beams. And then a computer will generate the image using that data. And that image of an SEM is three-dimensional. Take a look, it's much different. This is a red blood cell in 2 dimensions. This is a red blood cell in 3 dimensions. We can see the outer structure very clearly, but we cannot see the inner structure like we could for a TEM. So that's the big fundamental difference. An SEM will produce a 3 dimensional image so you can see the surface, the 3 dimensional structure, unlike the TEM. So neither is better than the other. They just do a totally different thing. Now we're going to talk about magnification and color when it comes to electron microscope. The electron microscope has a significantly higher magnification. Typically, you use it around 100,000 magnification. It can go up to 500,000, but that's with very special electron microscopes. And when it comes to color, usually there is no color. It's black and white. And you can use a specific kind of stain called a heavy metal stain, which will make the black blacker and the white whiter. Basically, it will enhance the contrast of the grayscale, but there will be no color. So if you ever see an electron microscope with color like this, then you know it was computer software generated. It was not a specific stain or a dye. Next, you should know that an electron microscope has a significantly higher resolution than a light microscope. That means an electron microscope has a even better ability than a light microscope to discern detail and clarity. In fact, its resolution is 0.2 nanometers, so much better than light microscope. So an object, two objects that are less than 0.2 nanometers apart, only then will they not be seen as separate objects and they will blend together as one. Lastly, you guys should know that an electron microscope specimen preparation is far more complex than light microscope. And also, these guys are freakishly expensive, Elon Musk style stuff. You will never see these in your typical school. Guys, we are almost there. Let's finish off this video by talking about developments in microscopy. We're going to talk about two developments, fluorescence and freezing. Let's start off with this one right here. You should know there's a very special kind of light microscope called a fluorescence microscope, and it works using UV light instead of visible light. That's pretty cool. But what's the significance of this? You should know something that is fluorescent is something that can light up in the presence of UV light. What does this mean? Let me show you using a cell. Let's say you have a cell and you want to highlight one part of this cell, let's say the nucleus. Then you can use something called a fluorescent dye that binds to nuclear material. So once you apply this dye, all this dye will go ahead and bind to the nucleus. And when you view this under a fluorescent microscope, you will have a very dark background. That's what's very different compared to a light microscope. A light microscope had a white background. This one has a dark background. Now, anything that is fluorescent will brighten up. In this instance, the nucleus. So in this way, you were able to highlight one specific structure instead of the whole cell. This is very useful in certain research purposes. Now, the second thing you need to learn about is something called freeze fracture, and this is related to electron microscopy, and it's very similar to what it sounds like. Scientists love to use this to investigate membrane structure. So let me explain how it works. What you do is you take your sample or your cell and you freeze it really rapidly. And then what you do is you try and break this frozen object now. And you know things break along the weakest path. So this sample will now break along the weakest path. And guess where the weakest path usually is? The membrane. Let me show you clearly here with a diagram. If we zoom into here. Here we have the phospholipid bilayer. When you break this sample, it will break in between these two layers of the phospholipid bilayer, which allows a scientist to easily investigate what's going on inside the plasma membrane itself by looking at the proteins and all sorts of structures that's going on there. That's really the main use of what we call freeze fracture in electron microscopy. Now, guys, that is it for this video. I really hope it was useful. I really hope we got something into your big brain, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.